You know, a few years back, I was at our General Assembly of the PCA, and I met a man of whom the world was not worthy, as Hebrews 11:38 puts it. And he became a friend of mine. He was a Palestinian Christian, formerly a Muslim, living in Gaza, and he was part of a church planting group that was a mixture of Palestinian Christians and Messianic Jews. That is, Jews who believe that Jesus is the Messiah, so Jewish Christians, essentially. Now, the tension between Palestine and Palestinians and Jews goes all the way back to Jacob and Esau. The Jews being the descendants of Jacob and the Palestinians being the eventual descendants of Esau. They have warred ever since. That's thousands of years of tension. Yet my friend and his Jewish companions were reconciled together because of the gospel. And we're bringing that gospel and that reconciliation throughout Gaza, seeing reconciliation happen. So over the course of a few days, he and I sat together at the General Assembly proceedings and meetings. We had some meals together, and I got to see Jesus in him, hearing about how difficult it is to bring reconciliation in Palestine to peoples who have thousands of years of history of tension and war. And he even asked me if he could betroth his daughter to Gabriel, because that's how it works in the Middle East. And I almost said yes, but I didn't. But anyway, he got the opportunity to speak at our PCA's General Assembly, to speak before everybody. And he said this when he spoke. Me, as a Palestinian Christian, I have to trust God day after day, if not moment by moment, so I can reconcile with my Jewish brothers because the challenge is an endless challenge. I believe from all my heart that we, Palestinian Christians, together with Messianic believers, have a message that politicians have never delivered. It's Christ, the Prince of Peace, that makes us peacemakers. And through him we can trust, love, and live a life that is worthy, a kingdom life. That's true reconciliation right there. And trust in God was absolutely necessary for it. That's what my friend was saying. And that's what we've seen in the past few Rollo Devos that we've been looking at in this part of the story. We've been seeing that trust has to be present. But we have seen that only from the side of the one extending forgiveness. Now we need to see in the story that not only does the one extending forgiveness need to trust, but the one who is receiving forgiveness must trust. I mean, what prevented reconciliation from happening back in Genesis 45 when Joseph actually extended forgiveness to his brothers? It was the fact that they didn't trust him. They thought that he was just waiting for Israel to die and then he'd take his revenge. And for 17 years, they'd lived in fear of that day and pretended to be reconciled, even though they really weren't. And you know, we can kind of understand that lack of trust. I think we can. I mean, we might say, or if they were with us, they might say, well, people are sinners and they can fake forgiveness sometimes, and they would be right. So we can kind of trust that we can kind of understand why they would have been afraid to trust Joseph. Yet that's, of course, why the title of the Devo for today is Trust in the Grace of a Sinner. The grace of a sinner is not like God's grace. God's grace is absolutely reliable. Ours is not. So we might wonder, why should I really trust that person who said they've forgiven me? Why should I trust them if they're a sinner? Well, for one thing, true reconciliation cannot happen unless we do. Unless we are willing to take the risk of trusting that other person. Remember that book I mentioned a couple of days ago, As We Forgive? It's a book about the reconciliation that's happening in Rwanda. And it makes this point too. In it, a pastor says the goal had to be something more than peaceful coexistence, the maintenance of suspicious parallel lives, ever ready to burst into flames. The goal was reconciliation. If they hadn't truly reconciled, truly learned to trust one another again, then another civil war would have been just a matter of time in Rwanda. And if we don't choose to trust the grace of a sinner and their forgiveness of us, then we only have suspicious parallel lives ready to burst into flames, as that one pastor put it. The second reason that we should trust the grace of a sinner is what we've just talked about in the past couple of Devos. The 2 points that we talked about there are just as true for the person receiving forgiveness as they are for the one giving forgiveness. If we, as the one being forgiven, trust God's rule over this world and that he is working for our good, then we can trust the grace of that sinner. If the person really is holding malice in their hearts, well, we can trust that God will take care of that. If they try to take revenge on us, we can trust that God is going to work that for our good. So you see, it's really not the grace of the sinner that we're trusting. And even here, we're trusting God's rule and his good work, which allows us then to trust the sinner. That's why my Palestinian friend could trust the Jews. That's what they had to do every day. So you guys think about that, and we'll see you again tomorrow.